Mr. Skipworth.
Ooh, thank you, Madam Mayor.
More.
Oh, sorry about that. Vino Veritas. I dig Latin. Ajikawada Gis. Yeah? There you go. Okay, so the last few weeks, the City Council has had a number of very important opportunities to get together and talk about a variety of things. Probably the prelude to most of it was our opportunity to discuss the strategic plan and to go over that in great detail and see the summary of the contributions of indeed the City Council and the city management and staff, but just as, if not more importantly, the perspectives, the comments, and the ideas that have been offered by a great many people throughout the community, which I think have helped to crystallize an awful lot of the next successive phases and era of where the city of Corona will go. And I'm very excited based on what's been provided thus far and how we'll continue to craft a plan, the specific objectives from that strategic plan. And then last week, we also had the opportunity to review the upcoming budget, which will be presented formally in 2 weeks. Is that right, Mr. City Manager? Okay. And then we had a wonderful presentation by our own Mrs. Eden to discuss in great detail many of the elements of the City of Corona's budget. Right? Got an affirmative nod of the head, and I appreciate that. To identify a great many important things here in looking at not only our current condition, but looking back a little bit to identify some of the all too well-known trends from an economic standpoint, but also looking at, in talking about the budget in total, the things that we are right to continue to maintain a focus on so that we are truly, thoroughly, and fully prepared for the future as it comes at us, which it most certainly will. One of the things that came up during the course of that conversation of our budget workshop, which lasted close to 3 hours or thereabouts, something like that, which I found very informative, as I always do, was talking about how the city, and the term came from the last decade, so I'm not going to belabor it, but how we have worked to right-size our organization, if you will, to make sure that we have the appropriate number of professionals working for our city, on behalf of our city, to serve our city in the right positions and the right capacities to make sure that we're able to deliver the services that we do. One of the things that was a point of interest to, I think, more than just myself, was making sure we understood the actual number of positions in a given department. There were some questions that went with that, and rightly so, because there's been a lot of activity. In addition to the activity of some attrition and some of that right sizing, was also the reallocation of some of our staff into different areas within our local government, switching divisions, switching departments, in some cases re-engineering an entire department, in the case of perhaps distributing some of that workforce into more than one department for its new structure to deliver the services that we work hard to make sure we're able to remain in a position to deliver effectively and in a timely manner. But as we talked about that, one of the things that helped to both clarify and helped, I think, to cause me to continue to look at our budget over the last couple of weeks, the last few days in particular, was Mr. Robbins had mentioned that our workforce has been reduced by some 270 positions or thereabouts. I don't want to overgeneralize, so
Yeah, that's correct.
okay, and that was from a peak of
2008.
About 900.
just under 900, right around there. So bad math aside, you know, I'm looking at something, a figure perhaps around 30%. Okay, and I appreciate that. And the concern that I looked at was, it is important for us to make sure that we have the right number of people, the right people, and that they're prepared and supported to go out and deliver the services that we have. And to achieve some of that, we need to make sure that we are capable of outsourcing some of those responsibilities and duties that we have in the past held within the organization, but we can now deliver via a contracted vendor in some cases. And I think we've identified many appropriate avenues for that. The concern that I've been trying to reconcile is that some of our most recent decisions when it comes to our employees and making the future financial obligations we have as an entire organization has affected the number of employees that we have, and one of which is been trying to forecast our financial obligations in terms of PERS and some of the other financial institutions that we participate with, and to make sure that we do that. And yet with a 30% reduction in our workforce, one of the things that I think is specifically affected is the number of people who would continue to make their own individual contributions toward PERS, which operates on a regular basis of not only funding via the agencies themselves, but the individual participants who contribute their share. And so I have that concern, and I ask in all sincerity, you know, are we making sure that we as a participant, as a public agency, that we're continuing to be in the right position in terms of being a member of PERS, that we maintain a sufficient workforce that's contributing a sufficient amount of member contributions in that regard. And I would just ask that we continue to look at that, because I think that's a viable dialogue that we need to continue to have. And in looking at that, going back to our positions as a whole and seeing how many have changed, yet in some cases the department, the overall figures haven't changed. It's easy to get lost in how many went here and how many went there and how many switched departments a year ago or 18 months ago or 6 months ago. And I wanted to ask now with this great long preamble, well, you know, it was, but I'll ask Mrs. Eden to start. You shared with us, and I think it's in here, you shared with us some things that you are right to be very proud of, that the city of Corona has enjoyed being the recipient of a number of financial budgeting awards from a particular organization. Is that right?
That is correct.
And would you like to name that organization tonight?
GFOA and CSMFO.
And what particular is it that they look for in a local governmental agency when they're deciding whether or not to bestow upon them the recognition that they have?
It's a very long list for the budget. There is certain requirements that are required.
Can you explain what the acronym is?
Sure. CSMFO is the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers. GFOA is Government Financial Officers Association. And our budget is submitted to CSMFO for the award. And specifically what those requirements are, I didn't come prepared with that information, but there is a long list of it, as well as with GFOA. I can get that information to you, though.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to touch on that just for a moment because I think it is important. And the reason I ask that is we have earned that award as an institution, organization, for a number of years running, right?
Correct.
Approximately how many?
21, I think it is, on the CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
She's going with acronyms again. You know,
She explained it.
Okay, good.
And with the budget, it's 10 years.
Okay. The reason I ask that is, like any good, strong organization, they identify an appropriate high standard that they want to perform to. And I think that we've continued to demonstrate our capacity to do that. But from time to time, I think it's also important that we compare it to an alternative standard or a concurrent standard to make sure that we get a fresh look at it from a different angle. Now,
Well,
whether it's a review or a periodic assessment, I don't know, some people might call it an audit, I don't know. But do we incorporate anything like that on an organizational level in addition to the fact that we've continued to meet this particular standard?
Every year there are new standards or pronouncements coming out from GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and we have to comply with that through our audit. And what GASB has been trying to do is provide a financial report that is easier for anyone to pick up and read, and that it's more similar to what a private sector financial statement would look like. So the reports are evolving every year, and there are new pronouncements to make it to where government agencies have to be transparent. Unfunded liabilities have to be included in those financial reports, so that there is the information included in the report. And by going through the audit and by it being submitted for these awards, it has to include all of that information and have it be transparent.
So the particular areas that you've just discussed are those organizations that we have prepared the body of work to be reviewed by those organizations. They have standards that exceed those in the private sector who would be contracted out to come in and take a look at whatever from a financial standpoint?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to hear. I appreciate that very much. Mr. Robbins, just kind of transitioning out a little bit and stepping back a little bit from the cash end of it all, do we have a similar way of just kind of assessing organizationally in a holistic manner, similar to what Mrs. Eden has continued on the legacy of our financial structure?
I really don't understand your train of thought here. When it comes to budgeting in any organization, your cash or your revenue will dictate how many employees you have or the projects that you do.
Right.
And so that's been the case over the last 5 or 6 years. You know, whatever the cash is that we have coming in dictates how many employees that we have, and that will dictate the future too. If things get better, we will have more employees, and we will be able to service some things we haven't serviced in the past. If we don't, or if PERS rates continue to go up, or those type of things happen, we'll have to make adjustments and make sure that we balance, because that's the most important thing that we do, is balancing our budget.
Very good. And I'm asking just because, again, any organization, any group, or sometimes even individuals seek to hit a certain standard, but they become so aligned to meeting those objectives that maybe there's other elements that don't get considered over a period of time. I want to make sure that, you know, that we have a process, at least internally, to assess whether or not, oh yeah, we're still on the right track, we're considering the most contemporary measures, whatever.
We're constantly assessing our organization. That's why we've made so many changes lately, because we have to. PERS rates are starting to rise very, very dramatically, and it's something that we have to address as an organization over the next 5 years as to what we're going to do about that. As I mentioned before, you're looking at probably about $4.5 million more just in the existing employees we have right now to pay for them over the next 5 years. That money's got to come from somewhere, and at this point in time, we're not exactly sure where it's going to come from. So again, it comes down to the amount of money that you have coming in is going to dictate the number of employees that you have and the number of projects that we have in the city. And it's that balance that occurs practically every day here in the city with all the directors as to how we deal with that.
Okay, very good. I appreciate your responses on that as well. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of touch on is, as part of our conversation last week, was in terms of capital projects. You might remember that. Mrs. Eden, you remember that?
Specifically which?
Nah, I'm not going to get into specific projects. You can relax. But we have a very robust schedule or list of capital projects we'd like to get to. Yeah, we have a very finite number of things we're going to address on an immediate basis. Correct. And as Mr. Robbins just talked about, I think it's dictated by the amount of finances that we have available to us. It's important to note, at least in what I was hearing in part during our budget workshop, is that there are general fund projects as well as
Other funds.
other funds that address similar projects, but by virtue of where they're placed and who they're administrated by, necessarily have to be isolated and administered independent of one another. So we have kind of multiple schedules going on, correct?
I don't quite understand what your statement was there. The funding source is who should be paying for that CIP.
Right. Mr. Daly, you speak my language kind of periodically, so you understand what I'm getting at? We have a lot of projects to do, but we don't necessarily have a lot of projects to do exclusive to general fund. Some have your department, some are in other departments, and we'll continue to prioritize those according to our capacity to do so. Is that right?
That's correct.
Well said. Thank you. Appreciate it.